Good morning, gorgeous. How are you ladies doing this morning? I hope you're all doing wonderful. For those of you who are here for the very first time, welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Michelle Daff, and for those of you who are returning, welcome back. Thank you for being here today for another session in Feminine Rehab and our series, Beauty and Boundaries. We've been talking about how you, as a beautiful feminine woman, can start to incorporate boundaries in your life in all aspects. So, at work, with your friends, with your dating life. And today we're talking about boundaries with your parents as an adult. Now, this can be a very challenging area for those of us who struggle with fear. If you had any issues with parents being disciplinarians or stopping you from speaking your mind. But almost all of the boundary issues that you have as a person, or people-pleasing issues, or just being too nice, stem from your childhood. They come from things that happened a lot of times with your parents. And as adults, we have a difficult time breaking out of that. Even if we've been able to sort of master boundaries in other spaces, a lot of times when it comes to our actual parents, we freeze up and we cannot speak up for ourselves. So today we're going to talk about some ways that you can start learning how to have boundaries that are healthy with your parents, and some things that you can do to sort of think about areas that maybe you feel angry about in your life, because maybe there are some things that you're struggling with in terms of boundaries that you haven't quite considered. And we'll talk about ways that you can address it in love. But before we get into the video, I just want to let you know I am so grateful for each and every one of you ladies. I hope that this series is blessing you. I hope it's opening up your eyes to areas in your life that you can change, and that you're having the courage and the faith to press on. I invite you to follow me on Instagram at A Feminine Impression, and my personal Instagram page at Dr. Michelle Daff, and to support my fragrance line, Find Forever, and purchase my fragrance 2911. So without further ado, go ahead and sit back, relax, get something to drink, get something to write with, and let's talk about this. So why are boundaries with your parents important? When we are born into this world, we get our parents that we do not choose. Okay, we're born into families, and our parents shape us and teach us how to become citizens in this world, how to interact with other people. They teach us about ourselves and how we see ourselves and what we're capable of doing. And in that child rearing process, some parents are not aware that their behavior can cause issues for their children in terms of learning how to advocate for themselves and speak up for themselves. And in return, parents are parents, and they feel that they're parents no matter how old you are. So the way that they treat you when you're 5 may not change when you're 15, when you're 25, when you're 35, when you're 45. In their mind, they may still see you as this small child, but you are not. And as you grow up and you start to have a life of your own, thoughts of your own, things that you just want to do that are different than what they taught you to do, it's okay to start enforcing that and letting them know that you're an adult, you love them, you respect them, but you've gone a different way, and that's okay. Now, all these things I'm going to talk about today are a lot more difficult if you still live at home. Okay, it's important to still practice them, but certain things may not be able to be enforced because you're still under their rules because you live in their home. But there are certain boundaries that, regardless of whether or not you live there, they should still be respected as a person. I know this topic is very scary, especially if you have things that you've been wanting to tell your parents or things that you've just been struggling with internally, but it's time to stop running from the pain. This is something you're gonna have to face head on if you finally want to be free, if you want to finally be happy, if you finally want to be able to feel like you're an adult. Okay, if you're one of those people who, when you're around your parents, you shrink and feel like you're 10 years old again, then this is an area that I encourage you to start thinking about and praying about, because that tells you that you're mentally and emotionally and spiritually in a place of bondage, and you're not able to break out of it. Even if you have a wonderful parent, even if you're someone who loves your parents dearly and they did the best they could to raise you, because of maybe some of their tactics in raising you, cultural beliefs and things of that nature, there are some unhealthy mental strongholds that they have over you. And there's only one way to get out of that, which is prayer and practice. Even if you've been doing something for a very long time or allowing something for a very long time, enough is enough. You can get to a point where you say, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like this anymore. So it doesn't matter if you've been allowing whatever it is that you've been allowing. Today is a day where it's going to change. And if you're sitting here thinking, I don't know how to have boundaries, I don't know what should be a boundary. If anything doesn't sit well with you, anything that they're doing, anything that they're telling you that doesn't sit well with you anymore, that doesn't feel right internally, that is an area that I want you to consider. That tells you that maybe your boundaries are being compromised. And so keep that in mind as you're listening. In terms of boundaries, one area of boundaries that comes up, especially if you're a little bit younger, maybe a teenager, or just kind of getting into adulthood, is physical boundaries with your parents. Now, some people grew up in households where everyone's kind of really touchy-feely, kissing and hugging, but you may get to a point in your life where you don't want that, or you don't want to be kissed in public in a certain way or touched in a certain way. And there may be very valid reasons for that. No one really gets to sit here and say your reasons are not valid. They're valid if you believe that they're valid. And if you don't want that anymore, that is your choice. It is your body. Okay. And if something has happened to you, you've had a boundary violation, say a sexual boundary violation in your life, then this is one of those very sensitive areas that definitely needs to be addressed, especially if you're a teenager. If anything doesn't feel right in terms of physical touch on you from a parent, then it should not be allowed. It doesn't matter that they're your parent. Another common physical boundary violation, especially when you're a teenager, is your privacy, your personal belongings and things being looked through and being used without your permission. So you may have a parent who likes to wear your clothes and maybe they like to put your purse on and go to the store without asking you. Okay, that is an example of a boundary violation. Yes, they're your parent, but it is still your item and they still need to ask you out of respect. These are things that are just common respect issues that a lot of times family members just sort of trample over, because in families we get so comfortable that we don't feel like we need to give our family members respect the same way that we would a stranger. So I just wanted to get that out of the way in terms of teenagers. But as an adult, a boundary violation that could come up is your time. Your time is very precious, and as you get older, you start to realize that. And things that maybe you would have allowed, you may want to start reconsidering. So as an adult, you get to determine how much time you want to dedicate to certain things when it involves your parents. For example, holidays. Which holidays do you want to spend with them, or how much time do you want to spend there? Maybe you want to have some time with your friends during a holiday, or you want to travel somewhere during a holiday. Do you feel guilty about sharing that? Do you feel bad that you can't be there and so you don't do what you want to do when you say, okay, my mom's going to be upset or my father's going to be upset? And this also applies to in-laws, okay? This whole conversation is not just your physical parents, but it could be your in-laws or anyone who acts as a parental figure in your life, right? An aunt or a foster parent. The same concept comes into play in terms of visiting. They may want you to visit them a certain amount. They may want you to bring your children to visit them a certain amount, and that may not be reasonable for you. This is also a concern in the area of visiting. Maybe they want to visit you and they just show up to your house unannounced, and that's not okay with you. Or maybe they want you to visit them. They want you to come twice a week to come see them, or once a week, or twice a month, and that's just not reasonable for you anymore. Are you able to voice that? Are you able to tell them that it's not a good time? You have to call them back, or you can't call them every single day. You can't text them back right away like you would like to because you're at work or you have other responsibilities. Are they able to value your time? And this is something that you just have to think about. Do you feel anxiety when you get that call from your mom and think, oh gosh, she calls me so much, like I need a little bit of space? The issue of time also comes up, say, if you need time to yourself. maybe you're on a family vacation, or maybe you're just in a certain season in your life where there's something going on and you need time to yourself. You are grateful that they want to spend time with you and that they're concerned about you, but you need time to yourself. Are you able to tell them that? Are you able to share those concerns with them without fear that they're going to be angry at you or that they're going to give you a 3-hour lecture? Are you allowing yourself to sit there for 3 hours as an adult and just sort of be dumped on? These are things that you have to consider. How are you feeling about this? Maybe you don't mind. And if that's the case, that's the case. But whenever you start to feel like your life is being hovered over in a certain way, or that you cannot say no, then that's when you need to take a step back and reconsider. Another area of boundary violation that comes up often as an adult is your identity. A lot of times parents, they feel that they've raised you in a certain way where they've sort of molded the way that you think about things and the things that you should and should not do. And it's great if you've had a very strong foundation. But as an adult, you may start to come upon things and get a different perspective. You might be educated on certain things that change your viewpoint, or you may have a certain experience that they will never be able to understand. And that's okay. It's your right to be able to exercise the way that you feel. And your mental boundaries and emotional boundaries should not be crossed just because they feel that this is the right thing. It's always okay to have conversation and banter and all of that. But once you're an adult, you start thinking like an adult, and it's okay to be able to have thoughts that are different than your parents. For example, maybe your faith. Maybe you decided to be a Christian and your parents don't like the fact that you are tied to Jesus, and they may try to stop you or try to sort of bring you down with negativity or with just comments that really get to you. This is a boundary that should not be crossed. Your faith is personal. And even if they raise you in a certain way, you should be able to say, this is something that I feel very strongly about, and I would really appreciate if you could respect it. This also applies to your political views. Okay, as an adult, you get to start seeing what you think and start thinking about how your life is shaped by politics, and start aligning yourself however you want or do not want to align yourself. This is also an issue that comes up with child rearing or raising children, right? Your parents may have their way of raising their children and you have your way, and maybe they don't like how you're doing certain things, but there is a boundary that you can put up to say, this is what we're doing as a family, and I know that you may not agree with it, but I would really like you to respect this. Or if they're doing something that you didn't like in childhood and they're doing it to your children, having that boundary to say, I'm sorry, but this is inappropriate and we don't want this to continue. And feeling strongly about it enough to say it in a loving way, but not ignoring it or watching it happen or just being too afraid to speak up, even on behalf of your children. This issue also comes up in health. Okay, your health is also a personal boundary area where you should not have their comments, if they're very ruthless or if they're demeaning, impacting you. If you live a certain lifestyle, they may be concerned about it. As parents, they're going to talk about it. They're going to advise you, and that's fine. But when it gets to a point where you feel that your boundaries are not being respected, say you have a certain diet or you choose not to eat meat, and every time you come over, they make you this huge meat dish and they expect you to eat it, and you don't feel comfortable with that. Do you still eat it because you're too afraid to tell them and enforce the fact that you don't eat meat anymore? Or are you able to say it? Or do you just feel so much anxiety about even coming over because you know that they're going to prepare this thing for you that you've already told them over and over again that you don't like? These issues can also come up in terms of your identity with the way that you dress. Okay, you deciding that you want a certain lifestyle. Maybe you're someone who is leaning more into their femininity and you're choosing to dress in a different way. You're wearing dresses and heels and you actually take care of yourself and you get your nails done and you smell nice and you smile and you're sweet, and they look at you like you're prissy or you're bougie and they say negative things. Okay, this is a boundary violation for them to impose how they feel in a way that demeans you is inappropriate and it shouldn't be allowed. But you have to be the one to step up and say that you don't like it and you're not going to accept it. Another boundary violation in terms of identity can also come with questions that you find to be very intrusive or inappropriate about your life as an adult. When you're a child, if they ask you a question, you do need to answer it, and you need to answer it with truth. But as an adult, there are certain things that they don't have the access to anymore. They're not privy to every bit of information about your personal life. And if they're doing this in a way that makes you feel uncomfortable, having conversations about that is necessary. Now, if you grew up in a home where your parents were very intimidating and they use intimidation to try to control you, it doesn't just stop in adulthood. They're probably still doing that. And even if they're not doing it in the way that they did it when you were younger, mentally, you may still be afraid of that. And you may still feel the need to lie, which happens a lot with those who struggle to stand up to their parents. You may find out that you may realize that you lie a lot, that you're covering up where you're going, you're covering up how long you're going to be there, who you're with, what you're doing with your life. You're lying about so many things because you're afraid of telling them what you do now, what you stand for, what you don't allow. And in turn, that ends up hurting you. Oftentimes as adults, we end up being very frustrated when parents violate certain things in terms of our relationships, like who we're dating, when they have very strong opinions and behaviors about who we're dating or who we're married to. If they're having friendships or relationships with people that we've cut off. Maybe you had a friend who did something that was horrible and you no longer want to be friends with them. But your mom is inviting this person to the family reunion or inviting this person to Thanksgiving. That's a boundary violation. And these are things to talk about. These are relational issues that are crossed that need addressing. One major area of boundary violation in families is triangulation, or pinning family members against one another. If you have parents who like to engage in gossip, or who are very negative, or who like to pin you against a sibling, or a cousin against a cousin, this is a boundary violation. If you feel uncomfortable having conversations about other people in the family that you care about, then it's something to be addressed. It's something to talk about and let them know that you're not comfortable with these conversations, that you don't want to tell them about what your brother's really doing, that you don't want to talk about your cousin and how they just broke up with their husband. You don't want to engage in negative conversation. You don't want to be pulled in. And that's a good thing. That's okay. And as you become an adult and you realize sort of what's going on, it's necessary for you to address these things because they are toxic and they are harmful. So you might be thinking, okay, Dr. Daff, you have talked about all these things. My blood is boiling. Like, I'm thinking about all the things that my parents do to piss me off, and I feel like I've done nothing about it. What can I do? Well, the first thing you can do is think about what your values are. As an adult, what do you value? That's really what boundaries come up to. It's like, what is it that you say you stand for? And that's what's going to dictate what you allow. Now, because these people are your parents, you do have that need, and you should truly value them and respect them. Now, I know not every parent is perfect, and some parents have had some really, really terrible things that they've done that make it very hard to respect them or to value them. And that's understandable. But for the average parent who's tried their best to raise you, when you're having these thoughts and these conversations, it is a good idea to consider them. Consider their needs. Consider what they may feel when you say this. So if they're really old and they want you to visit them often and you just can't because you have a family, or you don't, but you just don't have the time to be able to do that, consider how it might make them feel. Now, considering does not mean going with what they want. It means to at least take a moment and think about them. Think about how they might feel. Have compassion for them. Think about how they might have meant what they said or why they're saying it. Maybe they're just afraid for you, or they just love you so much. This is the only way that they know to express something. consider it first and then make your decision. And this consideration does go a very long way, and it allows you not to feel that guilt that often just sort of creeps up on us when we do something with our parents that we feel, whew, couldn't have done that when I was 9 years old, right? We feel this sort of guilt that just kind of traps us sometimes and makes us even want to go back and say, okay, never mind, never mind. But when you've considered them, then you've done the right thing. You've actually taken the time to think about their feelings and their wants and their needs, and then you've made your decision and you've chosen what you want. And that's okay. One of the toughest things with parents is standing your ground and being consistent. You're saying no in love. You're guarding your heart in love. You're guarding your life in love. The important part is the fact that you're doing it in love. So it's important to regulate your emotions when you're having these conversations with them. It's important to watch your tone and your word choices. Make sure that you take time to reflect on yourself and say, it makes me feel a certain way, or I don't like it when this happens because I feel A, B, and C, instead of pointing the finger and saying, well, you do this and you always do that. And this can happen. It's happened to me where I've gotten so frustrated and I've let things build up for so long that when I finally addressed it, I sort of blew up, and it was wrong. The way that I addressed it was wrong. How I felt and what I said was 100% accurate and true for me. But the way I said it was disrespectful and it was wrong. And that came from the fact that I didn't take enough time to regulate my emotions, and I waited too long to address it. So working on being respectful will stop you from feeling as guilty. You might feel guilty the first couple times you do it, especially if you have parents who will sort of spin it and try to make you feel guilty for whatever you're saying. Like, oh, well, I guess you don't love me, or, well, I guess all the money that you earn, you want to only spend on yourself and you don't want to help me anymore. Whatever that they say could really just stick on you because, again, they're your parents. So there is this sort of, mysterious sort of spiritual connection that they have to us, that even if you try to just act like they don't exist, you will always know in your heart that they do, because they're your parents, and inevitably you can't really get away from them. They're always going to be a topic that stays in your mind. But if you plan out what you're going to say, whether that's by writing it down, by rehearsing it with someone else first, and you're respectful and mindful of your tone, then that guilt is something that you can brush off of you and move forward with, and actually be happy. Be happy with yourself for doing something that was difficult. And like any other areas when it comes to boundaries, practice, practice, practice. The more you practice with your parents, even from something very minor, the stronger you're going to feel and the more confidence you're going to receive. And just like any area in terms of boundaries, practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the more you're going to feel confident in being able to express your needs without feeling guilty. These issues will spike in certain parts of your life, okay? Even if it hasn't happened now, there may be times in your life, seasons, where this will be more prevalent. For example, when you're getting married, or when you're pregnant, when you have children, during the holidays. These issues will come up more because they're kind of areas in your life where parents feel that they need to be present and they need to have their voice heard and they need to guide you in. So my advice before entering any of these conversations is to pray. Pray, pray, pray. Even if you have to pray for a month, even if you have to fast and pray before the conversation, pray about it. And God will give you the right words to say, and He will be there with you in the conversation to strengthen you and to encourage you to do it in a respectful and loving way. And try to do it as soon as possible, okay? Don't linger when it comes to these things, because lingering can spark resentment to build up and will cause you to be rude or mean to your parents without cause. And that will end up making you feel bad, and rightly so, because you are then being malicious and hurtful because you're resentful about a certain area in your life. When you're going to have these conversations, I would encourage you to have a friend or a family member or someone that you can talk to and sort of discuss this with and flush it out, and talk to them after you have a conversation with the parent. So as soon as you finish that conversation, you might be feeling a little guilty, you might be feeling a little rattled. Then you can call this person and decompress and tell them how it went, and they can encourage you and help build you back up. And remember, no matter what your parents are doing that's bothering you, ultimately, they're not here forever. And you never want to feel so horrible about something that you did and you don't have a chance to apologize. So try your best, your absolute best, to practice forgiveness. Whatever they did in your life, whether it was when you were younger or now that you're older, it's important that you forgive them for yourself. I'm not saying let them off the hook. I'm saying forgive them so that you can be free. You can take that load off of you, that pain off of you, and proceed and do what's best for you at this age. If you're holding on to those things, it will affect the way that you behave towards them. And ultimately, you're responsible for how you behave. And ultimately, my dear, you're still responsible for the way that you behave. So practice forgiveness and have patience. No one is perfect. And as parents, they usually do what they know. Whatever they saw their parents do, whatever they were dealing with at that time in their life, they're doing things based on what they know. And a lot of times, these changes that you're asking for, these boundaries that you're setting up, will need time. They will need time to be able to process that you're grown, process that you're changing, process what you want them to do differently. And that will require some patience on your end. But of course, it's absolutely important for you to know that if you do have a parent who is harming you in any kind of way, verbally abusing you, physically abusing you, sexually, anything that's inappropriate, there is a time to walk away. There is a time where whatever they're doing is completely inappropriate and you cannot have it in your life. And in those instances, prayer, forgiveness, and distance is going to be the best solution. And that has to happen sometimes, unfortunately, for some parents to be able to understand that you are serious. And I would encourage you to seek counseling, okay? Seek therapy for any of you who really struggle with being able to talk with your parents. Now, I know culturally, there are some cultures where the parent-child dynamic is just so extreme that you could never dare share how you feel. It would be such a violation of disrespect and it would just completely shatter the relationship. But I still encourage you, even in those relationships, to pray about it, because some of us will disrespect ourselves or even disrespect God in order to listen to our parents or follow our parents' lead. And that's just wrong. Sometimes there are things that do need to be addressed, and it doesn't matter if culturally it's wrong. Okay, I know that might sound really severe. I know that might sound pretty harsh to say, but we end up hurting ourselves so much for cultural reasons. And unfortunately, those things end up becoming a very, very serious issue in our lives where we struggle with depression and anxiety. And we do all of these things that our parents do not know about to try to regulate our emotions because we can't speak our minds. So the damage is much, much worse than addressing the issue. They will get over it, and they do love you, so they will understand, even if it hurts them a little bit. But seeing a therapist can help you to learn how to phrase certain things, can help you to unpack things in your childhood that impacted you, and help you to just become more courageous about boundaries in every aspect of your life. And regardless of whether or not you have parents or do not have parents, or whether your parents are alive or incarcerated or, in a place where you can't access them, at the end of the day, you always have your Heavenly Father. And He is your real parent. He gave you these earthly parents to love you and to bring you up, but they're not perfect. The only one who's perfect is the Lord. And through Jesus, you have the ultimate Father. And if you have to break ties with your earthly father or your earthly mother for a reason that, you wish you could change, but it's too hurtful or too damaging, you are always loved by God. He loves you so much and he will never let you go. He will be with you your entire life as a source of comfort and as a source of counsel. And you can always come to him with any problem, with anything that you're struggling with, and he will be there to help you. If you seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, then all of these things will be added on to you. You are never alone. You are always loved and supported through the strength of Jesus Christ. So lean on God. Whenever you feel fear, know it's not from the Lord, and he can help you to break through it. But trust in him and address the things that you need to address so that you can be free. I do have more to share on this topic, and you can listen to my podcast, A Feminine Impression, and listen to this episode in order to be strengthened. I have some examples of some boundary issues that I struggled with and how I kind of overcame them. And if you're in a situation where you just need that courage to talk to your parent about something, then listen to the podcast beforehand. Pray about it. Get encouraged. Be strong and courageous, and know that this is your life. It's going by quickly, and you need to get in control of it so that you can be at peace and you can finally live the way that you want to live and that you deserve to live, because this life is yours. I love each and every one of you so much, and I thank you for spending your time here with me. I hope that this information was helpful. I hope that you're encouraged to do what you need to do to address your parents, and know that no matter what, you are supported, and you are supported by God and being true to yourself. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at Dr. Michelle Dath and at A Feminine Impression, and make sure to visit my website, findforever.com, and support me by purchasing my fragrance, 2911. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Stay tuned for another episode in Beauty and Boundaries, where we're going to talk about having boundaries with yourself. And remember that in all things you do, make a feminine impression. Mwah. Bye-bye.